First of all, I'm delighted to see you all here. I think we're going to have an extremely interesting program tonight. We have covered all sorts of topics over the years, but we never really have got into having a pilot up here who does aerobatics intentionally. And a couple of other things, just a little personal advertisement here. Jim flies out of Watertown Airport, so he has the luxury of flying out of an airport whose current status is as a result of the master plan I got into place years ago. Some of you people know that and some don't. But anyway, Jim's had a remarkable career, starting with the service, going on to the airlines, and then into the airshow circuit. And it's going to be really interesting to hear about any and all of this that he cares to talk about. I did not mention to you before, Jim, but it's pretty much wide open. What you want to say is, cool with us. We don't set any strictures except be prepared to answer a lot of questions later.
Okay.
And one other thing that I do have to ask, and that is the origin of your nickname. I hope you get into that.
I'll get into that.
Very good.
I'll get into that. Well, thank you, Jim, and welcome. I'm really happy to be here and talk with all of you tonight. I'll start off here. If we can get our projector going here again.
That's the way it plans,
Yeah, that's the way it works. That's okay. It's working now. You can see up here, I'm Jim Fang Maroney, and I'll get to the call sign, the Fang, later in the talk. I started out in crop dusting, then as a competition aerobatic pilot, military fighter pilot, air show pilot, airline pilot, and then chief pilot, which I currently am right now. In addition to doing air shows, I'm the chief pilot for Delta Airlines. Let's see, how do we go to the next one? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Is that one? Okay, next slide. I'll start off with 3 stories, and they've all got a common theme. And then from there, I'll go into some of the other stuff. You saw earlier that I had up there, I got into crop dusting, and I'll talk about that first. In crop dusting, you've probably seen them going across the fields, and sometimes they go under the wires, and sometimes they do pretty steep pull-ups, et cetera, and whatever. And then oftentimes there's shelter belts of trees that they come up real close against. When I was spraying in a Stearman, as a matter of fact, we had Stearmans at the place that I sprayed. I was spraying a field, and you've all seen dust devils going across the fields. Well, there's a dust devil that was coming up, I saw in my peripheral vision, kind of come in my direction. But you got to be lined up and stay on your line so you don't veer off of where the spray is going to go on that field. And I was coming up against the trees there, and I was going to wait till the last minute to pull up against the trees to get good coverage. As I got real close to the trees, the dust devil grabbed the airplane, and when it does, it destroys a lot of the lift. And when I went to pull to go up against the trees, I didn't have enough lift there to get over the trees. So as I pulled, the thing's holding me down, and it lets go of me at the last second, and I pull up, and the prop hits the tops of the trees, and there's a big cut in the tops of the trees, and it goes, branches go everywhere, and the airplane stalls, and it does what we call a snap roll, goes right on its back. So there I am, upside down over those trees, and on the other side is a plowed field. And I'm out of airspeed, and I got all the chemical that I can't dump because I'm upside down. So what I did was I went ahead, because I'd been flying some aerobatics, I put the stick in my lap with full right rudder and continued the snap roll. And the thing snap rolled around, came down on the other side, then unloaded and got it out of the roll. And I came down on the other side, and I bounced the wheels off the ground and got airborne again. And the airplane actually wasn't hurt. So there were a lot of tree branches and leaves and stuff in it, but I managed to survive going through the tops of the trees there. Okay, so that's the first story. The next story is a military story. The military story was I was flying F-4s, and if you're familiar with the F-4s, you got models of them and pictures of them out there in the museum, obviously. Vietnam era jet. Big, fast, powerful airplane. It's got a couple hydraulic systems. It's got a main hydraulic system and a utility hydraulic system. And what had happened was we were flying missions out of Tucson, Arizona, and I was going to go over to California after the last mission. And on takeoff, the utility hydraulic light and the utility pressure gauge blinked at me, and I talked to my backseater, Marv, and I go, Marv, you know, the utility system just flashed on, and then it went out as I threw the gear up. So we went ahead and reviewed the emergency procedure, and a utility hydraulic system failure is a real bad failure in an F4. And unbeknownst to me, what had happened was the actuator in the right-hand wing had come out of the hydraulic cylinder completely. So, and it was dripping hydraulic fluid. And I didn't know that, though. The gear was up and locked, and the flaps were up and locked now. And what that actuator does is it has rods that go out when you lower your gear and your flaps, but especially your flaps. There's over-centering devices, and it goes past those so that it allows the slats and flaps to come out on that side. And there's one on each wing. We were going to go into George Air Force Base because they had F4s at the time. German Air Force still had some F4s there in training, and he said, well, you know, there's F4 mechanics there. Let's have them look at this utility system. So we went ahead and asked for a straight-in, you know, doing a precautionary approach, just a straight-in approach to the runway there at George Air Force Base. We're about 2,500 feet, about 10 miles out on a straight-in. When I threw the gear and flaps down, the gear came down, but the leading edge slats and the flaps on the right side did not come down at all because that thing's just laying in the wing. Okay, so that wing's clean, but the other side, there was an actuator that worked. The slats and flaps came out on that side, so it was like I had a bunch of aileron on one side all of a sudden. The airplane rolls upside down, and I yelled at Marv not to pull the handle because it would have put us right in the desert. And I continued to roll, to let it continue to roll around there, and I finally got it under control after one roll. And losing a lot of altitude, and got it under control. I had about maybe an inch left in the stick, and I had full left rudder to hold the thing from rolling again. So now I'm holding the airplane, and I've got it there, and the tower yells, go around, go around. The approach end cable didn't come up, which is the arresting gear, because we're going to take a arresting gear cable. Murphy's Law was in fine form that day. So I said, negative, we'll take the long field cable. So we come in hot, we touch down, and the utility system also runs your brakes, your nose wheel steering, and your aux air doors. And your aux air doors are underneath, and what those do is when the squad switch on that, when the wheels compress, the struts compress, that tells that the airplane that's on the ground, and those doors open up underneath to let more air up inside the engine because it's not coming through as clean, and the engines will stay at idle. If those doors do not come open, the book even says this, if those doors don't come in open, the engines will spool up to 100% or go to full power because it thinks it's still airborne. And sure enough, that's what happened. We touched down, we got no brakes, and I go to pull the drag chute, and here comes Murphy's Law again, the drag chute fails. The drag chute fails, I got no brakes, no nose wheel steering, but I landed good and straight, so that was good. And now the engine starts pulling up to 100%, and we're screaming down the runway. And I told Marv, I'm shutting off the right engine. I'm going to shut off the left engine. If we miss the cable on the other end, put your head back. I'll go like this, because if we go off the end of the runway, we're going to pull the handle and eject so we don't go rolling into the rocks and explode. So I shut off the one engine, and then when I shut off the other one, we did in fact get into the cable and we caught it. All that hydraulic fluid was streaming out on the afterburner section, and we couldn't see down the side of the fuselage, and it was smoking like gangbusters. So Crash, Fire, and Rescue thought we were on fire. And I did too, actually, because when we went into the cable, all that smoke from the hydraulic fluid back there rolled up around the airplane, and it must have looked like the Three Stooges, because the canopy came open, we didn't even use a ladder. We were out of that airplane and on the ground and running away from it, and the fire trucks were on it, hosing it down. It didn't burn. Actually, the airplane wasn't hurt, you know, but the smoke was kind of exciting. So anyway, so that was my military story. We survived that one, and we ended up getting that one fixed. Now the last story is going to be at an air show, and then I'll tie these three stories together, and I think maybe you will have already tied them together before I finish. At an air show, some air shows, some of them, you know, you have a crowd right in the center and on the runway, and everything's even. Other ones, the crowd is down by the end of one end of the runway or the other. And this one, in fact, was a show where the majority of the crowd was down towards the end of the runway, and just past the runway, about 800 feet past, was the city. There was a road and then the city, so you couldn't go over the town, obviously. And you have to be 500 feet back from that, so we met that okay. I went ahead and what my takeoff maneuver is usually is I break ground, I do a 4-point roll, followed by a pull up into a Cuban 8, which is some of what you were seeing on some of the video there. My engine quit right on my second maneuver. I pulled up, did my 4-point roll, and when I put my 4 to 5G pull on it to pull up in front of the crowd up here, right about here the engine quit. And the engine quit, and as it quit, I couldn't go forward because of the town and the house out here. So I continued over on my back. And when I got to here, I had no power. The airplane was just dead in the water. So out of airspeed, out of altitude, and out of ideas, kind of deal. Anyway, so then the airplane, you couldn't take the controls and go like this because there was just no wind. I mean, it just started falling. So I let it fall, and as I let it fall, and I probably got out somewhere between 600 to 800 feet, probably around 600 to 800 feet when this happened when I was on my back. And I let it fall, and as I'm falling, I'm picking up speed, and you can feel it in the stick. I'm getting more control, more control. So I just left it fall, left it fall. Finally, as I get right down close to the runway, I got enough speed for half a roll and land. And what I did is I pushed the nose up, and I do a coordinated roll, and I hit the ground, and I get on the brakes, and I stop the airplane. I slide back the canopy, I unstrap, I get out, and I take my bow to the crowd and wave to them, and they're all clapping, and they're thinking that, you know, it was part of the act. Little do they know that that was about as exciting as it could have been for me. So, anyway, okay, so that's my airshow story. Okay, so what are these three stories? One from crop dusting, one from military flying, and one from airshows have in common. The common theme there is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. And you know those situations I was in, all three of them were about as close as you can come to having things really go catastrophically wrong. And I kind of kept that theme all through my aviation career, especially with dogfighting, which is where my call sign came from, is don't ever, ever give up. Okay? So those are the three stories. Okay, we'll go to the next one here. There it is. There. Where did I get my aviation start? I grew up in North Dakota, a little town of Castleton, North Dakota, 750 people. My dad was a P-51 pilot, fighter pilot in World War II. He flew P-51s off of Iwo Jima, and he escorted the B-29s out of Tinian, Saipan, and Guam, which were going up, of course, to Japan and back. And so he was on Iwo Jima during the war. After the war, there was a big rift, and everybody was getting out, and he became a crop duster. So in that little town of Castleton, it's a farming community, he was a crop duster there, and he had a couple airplanes. One of them was a Cub, and when I was 4 years old, he put me in a Cub and started teaching me how to move the controls and how to fly an airplane. And so I started basically at age 4 years old, and he continued to work with me all the way growing up, and taught me a lot of the foundation I have today in aviation. When I was 16, I went and got my pilot's license, and then I went off to college. Well, the way I got into college was we didn't have a lot of money, and my parents had 4 kids, and I was managing a gas station my senior year. Besides working for my dad in the summer, then as I got into high school, I went ahead and started working at a gas station, and eventually ended up managing it. And I was saving my money, and I figured the schools in North Dakota were actually pretty expensive at that time, for me anyway. And I figured I'd have to work for 1, maybe 2 years, and then I'd be able to go part-time and go to college, get my college degree so I could go in the service and fly. That was the plan. But I wanted to really get going on it right away, but I didn't have enough money. Well, my boss had 3 gas stations and a flower shop. And he liked me so well, my first year after I graduated from high school, he gave me 2 weeks of vacation in August. So my buddies and I, we'd never been out of North Dakota, Minnesota, and South Dakota. Road trip. We're going to go to California. We're going to go chase girls and go to California and have a real vacation. So we jump in a van and we take all of our staples, potato chips and peanut butter and bread and whatever, and off we go, and we kind of party along the way and have a good time. Well, we started talking about, getting tired and whatever, and we started talking about our careers and whatever, and I said, I'm gonna go fly. I'm gonna go fly jets. And but I knew I needed to get a college degree, and so we talked a little bit about that. We got out to Fresno, California, and I went ahead and saw an Armed Forces recruiting building. This Armed Forces recruiting building, I said, hey guys, let's go in there. I want to talk to recruiters. Maybe there were some programs in World War II where you didn't have to have a college degree to fly. Maybe they got something like that nowadays. And they said, well, we're not interested in going to the military. We already got our careers planned out. And I go, well, why don't you drop me off? You guys go get supplies and give me about 3 hours, and I'm going to talk to the recruiters. So sure enough, they dropped me off. And I go in and I talk to the Air Force, I talk to the Navy, I talk to the Coast Guard, and I talk to the Marines. Now, granted, recruiters have a job to do, and they all wanted to get me in, but when you ask the hard question, are you going to fly? No, not without a college degree. So it's same thing with the Navy, same thing with the Coast Guard. And I'm starting to leave the building to go wait for my buddies. And I got all kinds of time left because that really didn't take that long. And this picture book Marine, he filled the doorway. He could have broke me in half. He goes, young man, he sticks out his hand and shakes it. He goes, what are you doing here? So I told him, and he said, come on in here and talk to me. So I did. And, those big guys are always just big teddy bears. And just the nicest guy in the world. He says, well, you're not going to fly in any of the services without college. But he said, if your buddies aren't going to be here for a while, he said, if you want to take some tests, you're not signing up for anything. He said, I'll give you some tests, and then if you change your mind that you want to go in the service, I can tell you what your aptitude is going to be and what kind of schools they probably send you to. And I go, yeah, sure, I could do that. So he starts giving me the initial tests there, which were very easy. He kept going, where did you grow up? And I told him, and I wasn't even that good a student. He said, man, they must have good schools. Well, he gave me all the tests up, including the one that they give to the college students before they go in as officers. And he couldn't believe it. And he gave me the flying test also for the ones who want to go to flight school. And he went into his commanding officer, who was a captain next door, and said, just a minute, and he was talking to him, and then he waved me in there. And I went in there, and then the Marine captain talked to me about it, and he asked me why I wasn't in college, and I said, well, I didn't have enough money, but I'm saving my money, and hopefully here in 2 years I'll be able to go part-time and do it. And he goes, well, He said, what are you guys doing tomorrow? And I told him, and he said, well, you're not going to be doing that all day. And I go, no. He says, we'll probably sleep in and then go get some supplies. And he goes, can you give me a few hours of your time tomorrow morning? He says, there's some information that I need to get for you, because you don't belong in the service right now, but information on colleges. And I go, sure, and I'll be more than happy to, because they've been so honest and upfront with me. We left, we had a good time that night, and then the next morning I called him up. That was before cell phones, and had to put 35 cents or 25 cents back then into the payphone. And he said, if you can be here at, I think it was 10 o'clock, he says, I need 3 hours of your time. I go, okay. So my buddies dropped me off. He put me in a government vehicle and drove me over to Fresno State. Had two counselors, a gal and a guy, college counselors, to tell me about the California school system. This is back in the 70s. In the 70s, the only reason somebody didn't go to college in California is because they didn't want to. They told me about this wonderful programs that they had, and I was interested in engineering because I like science and I knew it would help me with flying. And one of them was a chemistry instructor and the other one was an engineering instructor. And I told them that and everything. They told me about their programs and then how inexpensive it was. And I just couldn't believe it. And I said, and this is in August, and I said, well, there's one problem though. I said, it's unbelievable how inexpensive it is to go to school here. And I said, but I'm from North Dakota and I know we don't have reciprocity with you. Out-of-state tuition, I'm sure, is going to be outrageous. And they said it takes, and you had told me earlier when I asked you that it takes 1 year to become a resident of the state of California. And they both turned and looked at each other, and without saying a word, they turned and looked back at me, and the lady says to me, she goes, well, if you started school here this semester, you would stay 4 years and get your college degree here, wouldn't you? And I go, well, of course I would. And she goes, as far as we're concerned, you're a resident of the state of California. So I left the office there and went over to admissions and filled out the paperwork, and I signed up for college there. And I started college there. So I told my buddies and everything. Ended up not going back with them. I stayed out in California. This was August. The dorms were full, and I didn't know anybody in the state. So my buddies left and went back, and I didn't have a lot of money for an apartment, and I couldn't afford an apartment myself. So what I went ahead and did, well, let me back up. I called my boss, and he was actually very, very supportive that I was trying to make something of myself. And he said, I understand. He says, I hate to lose you, but I understand it's an opportunity for you, so go ahead and go for it. So I went ahead and I did. Didn't know anybody, couldn't afford an apartment, so what I did was, it's California, they got nice weather. I rented a garage for $40 a month. And I got an old mattress and a blanket and pillow, and I threw that on the floor, and I lived in the garage that first semester, and I ate my meals down at the college cafeteria, and I got a job in a gas station, working at a gas station 6 nights a week. So that was how I started college. And then in college, the day off that I had, the one day off that I had, I went out to the local airport and started working for the FBO operator there, pumping gas. He was a crop duster, loading, flagging, etc., and told him that I knew how to fly. And he ended up hiring me as a pilot then. And I started spraying for him. And then I started making some money. Simultaneously in school in engineering, I met my roommate, Chris Mann, who's just a wonderful guy, and he works for IBM. He worked for IBM for a number of years now, and he's done a lot of engineering for them. So, and we got an apartment, a real apartment, and we lived in an apartment for the rest of the time that we were in school in Fresno there. Yeah, the crop dusting then, I started crop dusting and spraying for him, and then you heard my one story there about one of that. And then, you know, crop dusters have got all kinds of stories, whether it be hitting wires, whether it be hitting poles, something, but there's always something going on there. It's pretty exciting flying. So. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. There we go, thank you. While I was in college, because I made some money crop dusting, then I went ahead and got into competition aerobatics. This was the first, this isn't the first airplane I had, but it's the first competition aerobatic airplane that I had. It's stressed for plus or minus 10 Gs, weighs 890 pounds, and has a 180 horsepower motor on it. And I started doing competition aerobatics, which really pushes you to strive for perfection while the judges are grading you on everything you do. So, and I got a handful of trophies somewhere in boxes and whatever, but they're in storage. But I had a lot of fun and learned a lot about aerobatics, doing competition and pushing myself to try to strive to be good. And I still own this airplane, and this is actually out in Watertown, where this picture was taken, Jim.
I recognize the name.
Yeah, so I still have that airplane. Competition, I did it for several years while I was in college, and then I did a few more when I went in the service after college. But then I got so busy in the service that I wasn't able to keep up on the competing in the air shows. It did lead to air shows, though. I started doing air shows in college, too. That was in 1976. After I got my degree in engineering, I worked for a short period of time. Doing engineering, and then I went back into the military. I went into the military, and of course I went into the Marine Corps. They were so honest and forthright with me that I said, you know what? And my dad always admired how the Marines were in World War II. So I went ahead and went in the Marine Corps, knowing that you'd be a naval aviator and you could go to flight school because their squadrons are set up the same way as the Navy. So I went in the Marine Corps, and then after you go through boot camp and officer candidate school, then as long as you pass all the exams, which were a piece of cake for me after having an engineering degree, went ahead and went to Pensacola. Went to Pensacola, Florida, and ended up getting my wings in 1981. And in 1981, the Navy trained, I think it was 1,676 naval aviators. And they grade absolutely everything all the way through your training program. I was number one. So I was really proud of that accomplishment, and I wanted to be, you know, as good a pilot as I could, so I went ahead and worked hard at it, and it really did pay off. From there, we went to a fleet squadron. I also got my first pick in airplanes. And at the time, we had a brand new airplane entering service in the United States, and it was the Marine Corps got them first. That was the F-18 Hornet. So I was one of the first to train in the F-18 Hornet. Our squadron, we stood it up and flew F-18s and flew missions all over the place. And then I was the first one to take the F-18 down to Top Gun at Miramar. So, and that was back in 1983. So we went through in 1983, and then the question will probably come up later, and I'll just touch on it real quick. Tom Cruise wasn't a big star then, and when they did the movie Top Gun, they came down there. The Navy gave him carte blanche, And then we invited them to some of the squadron parties so they could capture the characters. And, you know, we didn't really care who they were because we were the real thing. So, and so we were just being ourselves, and I got to give them credit. I think they captured a lot of that in the movie. Then I spent 8 years on active duty, and the airlines were hiring, and I had to make a tough decision. I didn't want to give up my military flying, but the airlines go in cycles on whether or not they're going to hire. So I went ahead and decided, you know what, I'm not going to give up my military flying. I'll go into either the reserves or Air National Guard if I can get hired at one of the units, and then I'll go see if I can get hired at the airlines. Well, I got hired with Northwest Airlines out of Minneapolis, and I'm from North Dakota. I went and beat on the door of the Happy Hooligans. The 178 ended up getting happy both places, and so I continued with my military flying. Now I had to do an air service transfer to the Air Force, and that went good. And they had F-4s, and I flew the F-4s for 5 years for the Happy Hooligans, and then they got 80 F-16s. And the F-16s that they flew, I flew those for another 13 years, I guess it was. So 18 years total in the Air National Guard. So 26 years total military service, simultaneously with the airline. During that time frame, I was an air combat tactics instructor. I was a flight commander. Then I worked my way up to ops officer. I did 2 different squadron commander tours, and then the last thing I did, I was the group commander. The group commander with several squadrons underneath me. And then 9/11 happened. These are the airplanes we were flying when 9/11 happened. These are called 80 F-16s. They're an air-to-air version of the F-16. And if you look on there, those are live missiles. They got the white tips, and the extra fuel tanks there. This is our generation's Pearl Harbor, 9/11, of course, and everybody remembers where they were. I was downstairs in a briefing room with a 4-ship, and I was briefing a 4-ship for a training flight. The intel officer came running in the room and said, "Your flight's been canceled. Quick, come into the intel vault, see what's going on." We jumped up, we ran in there, and we watched on TV in horror just like the rest of the United States. The command post is always up at this unit. We went ahead and volunteered right away to go wherever we needed to go. And they downloaded the practice ordnance on our airplanes, and an hour and 45 minutes later we had our combat load. We launched with a 4-ship, and we flew from North Dakota to Washington, D.C. and set up the combat air patrols over Washington, D.C. We had what we call a low combat air patrol, CAP for short, a low cap and a high cap. We air refueled twice. We were airborne for 8.5 hours, and then we landed at Langley Air Force Base when we were relieved by the F-15s out of Langley. There's an alert facility at the end of the runway at Langley Air Force Base, which is about 80 miles south of Washington, D.C. There's 4 barns there, and we slept on cots and lived next to our airplanes for the next several months and flew 5.5 to 6 hour missions round the clock, 24 hours a day, 5.5 to 6 hours, and we alternated with the F-15s out of Langley, flying combat missions over Washington, D.C. And if you remember, a lot of the major cities, of course, all the major cities in the United States had jet fighters over them there for several months. So I did that, and that was one of the tougher things flying because you had time to think. And we had to intercept a couple airliners when they got those flying again, but it was just mistakes. We certainly didn't shoot them down, but that was the mission. And psychologically, you know, we trained our entire military career how to shoot down the enemy. And now there was a possibility of shooting down an airliner full of Americans. And that was something that everybody had to struggle with. Everybody gave a lot of thought to that, and we talked about that. Thank God we never had to do it, but at the same token, it really changed the parameters of war for us. And it certainly has changed our country forever. Simultaneously with the military, then the Air National Guard, I was doing the airlines. The airlines in Northwest, I started out in the 727. From the 727, I went to the 757. From the 757, I went to the DC-10. Flew the DC-10 for a number of years and started doing a lot of overseas stuff with that. And from that, I went to the 747-200 and did that overseas. I'm type rated on all of them, and have flown just about everywhere that the airline goes except Africa now. We merged with Delta. There's more places now that I haven't gone because Delta went that Northwest didn't go, but did all over the Far East and then Europe with the airline. Completely different style of flying than some of the other stuff that I've done, but the challenges are still there with trying to make that flight as smooth as you can so that people don't even know that they're in an airplane. And you know, of course, you're always trying to make a real nice landing and then avoid turbulence at all costs if you can too. And then you're paid for your decision-making process. I've had several emergencies with the airline, but there's a lot of redundancy, and then the decisions you make usually make for a positive outcome. I've lost a couple engines here and there, but the airplane flies just fine on one engine, and we've lost some electrical systems. And again, you go back to some of your foundation and training, and where do you need to go? You make a decision. Do I want to go where there's weather, or do I have enough fuel to go to a place that doesn't have weather because I don't have all my instruments, etc. So those processes go on and challenge you in the airline sometimes. And then we also have simulators every year, checking us on how we're doing on that. Airshow career, 37 years. This coming year, 2014, is going to be my 38th year doing air shows. I have just as much fun now as I did 37 years ago. It's an adrenaline rush, and people ask me, why do you do it? And it's the way I can show my passion for aviation to the crowd and share that with the youth in this country. Now the youth in this country, because of what's happened, they really don't know that much about aviation, and they can't get close to it. When they go to the airport, they see big parking lot, TSA, long lines, maybe a gate agent, and then they go in this big aluminum tube, never get to talk to the pilots, never get to talk to hardly anybody. They really don't get a feeling for what aviation has to offer. General aviation, there's general aviation, military aviation, corporate aviation. There's so many different facets of aviation, and at an air show they can touch all of that. There's oftentimes corporate jets there. There's static display military. There's general aviation airplanes. There's all kinds of different aviation at an air show, and I get to go out there and try to excite the crowd, and then I get to talk with the kids, and I get to show them the airplane. We take pictures and whatever. And sometimes you'll spark an interest. And if you spark an interest, then that really gives me some worthwhile, makes me feel worthwhile. And aviation has obviously been my career. It's been my passion, and air shows let me share that with the people around me. I've got a few pictures here. You saw a little bit of video in the beginning there of some of the shows here, and I'll show you some of the pictures, and then I'll talk about the airplanes. You saw my aerobatic airplane. This airplane here is called a de Havilland Chipmunk, and I'll go to a different picture of it here. This picture right here is a tail slide. I'm at 800 feet, and I'm sliding backwards. That's why the smoke's going up around the airplane there. I absolutely can't see a thing inside that airplane right now. This was out of a tumble, and you can see the down elevator and the airplane falling as the smoke comes up and whips around there. That's kind of a cool shot. There's a picture. You can see the paint job on the air show. I'm also very patriotic, and it's red, white, and blue, and I designed the paint scheme on it. And I often get a lot of comments at shows when they ask the kids what's their favorite airplane. They like mine because of the stars. So, but it's de Havilland built this airplane. Mine was built in 1947. They built it as a military trainer. It was a two-seater. To both Great Britain and Canada used them initially, and it was to teach military pilots how to fly, the basics of flying, and then basic aerobatics. It had a 145 horse Gypsy Major engine on it. It weighed about 1,600 pounds, and didn't have a lot of instrumentation, and it was a pretty basic airplane back in 1947. I made it into what I call a super chipmunk. I clipped 3 feet off the wings. I took the flaps and cut them in half and added them to the ailerons, so I have 30% more ailerons for roll. Took the rudder off and put a 30% bigger rudder on it, 10% bigger elevator, heavier spar structure in the wing to make it stronger. Took the 145 horsepower motor off of it and put a 260 horsepower motor on it with a composite propeller. Put an air show paint job on it and smoke, and this is what I've been flying shows in since 1991. I started shows in 1976, and flew that other biplane for a number of years. This airplane I got in 1990, and in 1991 I started doing shows in it. I've been doing shows ever since in it. There's another good picture of the paint job. And I got to tell you, Greg in the back there, who I think all of you probably know, and his wife Carrie, Greg took these pictures. And I'm really fortunate to have somebody who likes my airplane as much as I do, taking those pictures. Here's some of the crazy stuff we do at air shows. The announcer told me the day before this shot, that in order to get Paul Stender riled up, he's the owner of the jet-powered school bus. He said, you're going to have to get closer than that. So after this, I showed him this picture. I said, was that close enough? So, but he's got a J79 in that school bus.
Yeah.
And we do a race. We do a race, and he always wins.
Yeah.
This picture is one of my favorites that Greg took. I don't know how you'd ever plan for that. The moon, you know, on some days during the daylight, you can see the moon. And he got this picture of me, and this is one of my signature things at the end. I'm at 100 feet, and I unstrap and slide back the canopy. I'm doing 120 knots, which is probably about 130, 132 miles an hour. And I stand up and wave, and I match the superhero on the side of my airplane. So I'm basically standing up the wind. There's a class 4 hurricane, I think. So my arm gets real tired. Okay, I've talked for, well, I guess quite a while. You know, one of the things that we think about when we listen to speakers talk is about our country and patriotism and everything else. And something I'd like to pass on. I think I've been a good patriot for a lot of years, and something I'd like to pass on when people say, well, you know, we haven't done that much, you know. And I said, you know, I wasn't. If someone hasn't been in the military or whatever. Everyone is a good patriot if they do whatever they're doing in our country, whatever job they're doing, that is patriotism. When you contribute to the economy and everything you do in our country, that is being a good patriot. And I'm just like everybody else. I put my pants on one leg at a time, and I've found something that I love to do, and all of you have been successful in something that you're doing, and that all contributes to the patriotism in this country. And we're lucky that we have the opportunities we do. I was shown a lot of opportunities in aviation, and I took every one of them. So got to fly off the aircraft carriers, got to fly night missions, got to fly a lot of different stuff, drug interdiction, and then my air show flying, and then the airlines. And it's been very, very good to me. And I've got a wife who supported me through all of this. She's put up with it. So, and she's actually quite acclaimed in her own field. She's a microbiologist and does research. And she was, she shakes her head, but she's very, very accomplished. But she works at the Blood Center for Southeast Wisconsin, and she's doing a lot of good research. And she allows me to do all this kind of flying that I do, so I'm really supportive there. But with that, I want to thank all of you for listening to me for a while, and I want to open it up to some questions.
Yeah, have at it. I have to get something out of the back of the room here.
Yes, sir.
I've flown in airliners where we hit some bumps, and the pilot seems to know it's coming. He tells you to strap in. What happened in Denver a couple of weeks ago where people were actually crashing against the ceiling? Weren't they strapped in?
Yeah, I think it was probably clear air turbulence. Denver sits on the east side of the Rockies, and there's the weather usually moves from west to east, and there's a rotor that comes over those mountains. And sometimes, depending on the temperature and the winds and the pressure areas, that rotor can get really severe. And it can be clear skies. Normally you see turbulence associated with clouds, but it can happen in clear skies, and I suspect that that's probably what happened. That nobody had talked about it being a problem, and that they didn't see any clouds, and they just got caught. You know, and you got to be. Somebody probably didn't have their safety belts on, and the flight attendants were probably working. But you know, when you're flying on the airline, even when it's glass smooth, whenever you're in your seat, put your seat belt on just in case that happens, because it can be pretty severe. The airplane will hold together, and it did, but the jolts can throw people off the ceiling. So, and when a captain tells you to fasten your seat belts, he really does mean it. So, okay. Yes.
Why are you called Fangs?
Oh, Fang, the story Fang. Okay, in the military, there's a lot of gyms, there's a lot of dugs, etc. Well, when you fly in a formation with other airplanes, when you go out to train and fight, on the radio, a nickname is something that distinguishes you from everybody else, so they know who's talking. That nickname is given to you by the squadron, and it's usually for something you do. And for example, we had a guy in the squadron whose nickname was Bubbles. His real name was Lynn Champagne. So his nickname was Bubbles. We had another guy who his nickname was Wizard. And I'm not going to tell you the story behind that one. And then, so anyway, so there's, you know, some of them are complimentary, some of them aren't. We had another one his nickname was Magoo. I don't know, some of you may remember the cartoon Mr. Magoo who couldn't see. Well, he kept losing sight of his lead aircraft, so he got nicknamed Magoo. Anyway, so that's where those nicknames come from. Mine, when I was in flight school, when I learned to dogfight, when I learned how to fight the airplane, the instructor started saying that whenever I got near a jet, my fangs come out. So that's stuck with me ever since. Okay. Yeah.
Today's news story about that airplane that's lost in Malaysia talks about it being a 777, apparently a very, very new aircraft.
Yes.
With so many backup systems that begin shutting down in order to provide a safety situation, you get this uneasy feeling that too many things were shutting down and the pilots couldn't deal with it. What do you know about the 777?
Well, I don't fly I haven't flown the 777, but it's a Boeing aircraft, so it's got a lot of similarities to the other Boeings I have flown. There's a rule in aviation that all aviators use as a foundation: aviate, navigate, communicate. So they fly the airplane first. When things start going wrong, they can get so busy trying to keep control of the airplane that once they do get it controlled and decide what they're going to do, then they're going to navigate, where am I going to take this airplane to get it on the ground. So that's the second thing. Then the third thing is communicate. But if you're so overwhelmed with what's going on with problems, you may never get to the communicate portion of it. Right now, what the press is saying is that the last thing they heard from was, good night. I mean, there was no problems on the radio. So we don't know if they had to aviate, navigate, and communicate, if there was some kind of emergency that caused it to crash. We don't know that. So the investigators are looking at several different scenarios, catastrophic or otherwise, and we really don't know. And I don't have a gut feeling because, that's a pretty big airplane, and if it crashes, they should be able to find some debris. And if they find some debris, then they should be able to, kind of like the TWA one off of New York, they should be able to put it back together using the black boxes, et cetera, and figure out what happened, what went wrong. They're certainly not ruling out terrorism. They're not ruling out someone stealing the airplane. You can put everybody in the back of that airplane to sleep, then they can go down low and below radar and go into one of those third world countries and land somewhere. But that's just a guess. There could have been a catastrophic thing happen where the wing structure broke. And if the wing structure broke and they were coming out of the sky, they're going to come out of the sky pretty darn fast. They're probably not going to have time to send a distress signal.
One of the reports said that the system shutting down, including turning off the transponder, these are automatic systems. No transponder, no radio anymore. My gosh.
Well, there is an explanation for sometimes shutting down stuff like that intentionally. If there's smoke in the cockpit and the actual transponder or radios are smokes coming and there's electrical fire going on, you'll shut them off, and that can happen. And or here's one: if somebody spills, they got to be real careful when they hand up drinks and whatever. If they spill water on that center pedestal, which is where those radios are, those radios will fry themselves, and smoke will go and everything else, and they'll shut them off. So I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's something that could happen. But it's really baffling. I'm as confused as everybody else, and I'm hoping that they find something soon so we can figure out what happened, because 239 people or something are gone.
Can I throw something in on this?
Yeah.
talking about the aircraft itself, there's an aviation database called Aviation Safety Network. On an ongoing basis tracks everything that happens worldwide in aviation. And they have a great statistical database. And I happened to look for the 777 because I was curious as to what their background was. The 777 first flew in 1994. There have been something in the order of 1,200 of them built. In the Aviation Safety Network database, there have been a record of only 11 incidents involving the 777, only 4 fatalities. One was a baggage handler on the ground that got crushed underneath the 777. The other 3 were that incident in California, a year or so ago, where the guy landed short.
At San Francisco.
Or San Francisco. And there were 3 people killed, one of whom was run over by an emergency vehicle. And that's the total safety record of it's just an amazingly safe airplane.
Yeah, so it's got a good safety record. I'm hoping that they find something soon.
Yes, yes.
Other questions?
You got a list of your air shows for the year, or?
Well, I don't have it in the slide, but
Schedule?
one locally here, I'm doing Waukesha,
Okay.
Waukesha, which is real close, and then I'm also doing, what's the other one, Greg? Waukegan. Waukegan's in September, Waukesha's in August, I think. August, yeah. So those are the 2 that I'm doing close. I'm doing one at the end of this month. The end of this month, I'm going to New Smyrna Beach, Florida, to do a show. So, yes.
Have you done one in St. Louis?
St. Louis?
Yeah.
I have. I've done the one by the Arches.
Did you do it last year?
Not last year, though. No, and I'm doing one north of there at Heartland, Missouri here this summer. But I'm not doing, I think St. Louis is having another one in, are they doing one at Spirit of St. Louis this year?
It's usually where they do it.
Yeah. I think they're doing another one, but I'm not in that one because I got a prior commitment on that same show date as theirs.
How do you ship your aircraft such long distances?
I fly it.
Yeah, but the gas mileage has got to be miserable.
Oh, it is. It is. It's not built for economy. So, and I do it the old-fashioned way. I got a magnetic compass that's probably about 26.5 degrees off, so I draw a line on the map and basically do pilotage. I check off my time and distance and heading at where I cross rivers, towns, intersection railroad tracks. I just fly like the old aviators did. So, yeah.
I think on your website it mentioned you're getting a new aircraft coming soon. Is that true?
Yes, I've got a new airplane that I haven't got on the airshow circuit just yet, but I got a new airplane that it's brand new. It's the hottest aerobatic airplane in the world. It's called an MXS. Let me go to my. This airplane weighs 2,000 pounds, empty. This thing weighs 2,000 pounds, has 260 horsepower. My new airplane weighs 1,150 pounds and has 400 horsepower. And it's got a roll rate like an F-16. And it's the most powerful and agile aerobatic airplane in the world. And it's called an MXS. It's made out of carbon fiber and composites, and it's a real animal.
So who makes it?
MX out of North Carolina. That's the name of the company, MX Corporation. And it's designed for one purpose. This airplane's plus or minus 10 Gs. The MX is plus or minus 14. Yes?
Sir, with all the modifications you made to your airplane, you were saying you trimmed the wings and so forth.
Yes.
And with the incident with Jimmy Leeward over at the air races,
Yeah.
does the FAA put a lot of restrictions on what you're allowed to do to modify this airplane in light of the fact that, how it is bad press spreads like wildfire and what happened to Jimmy Leeward?
Yeah, they do they put restrictions on you, but my airplane's licensed experimental. And so as long as I provide the paperwork and the documentation and the engineering engineering behind it. The FAA has an approval process for that. So,
So you do your own engineering?
yeah, I've got an aeronautical and mechanical engineering background. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes.
During the off-season, do you strip your airplane down and kind of rebuild it like?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, Wisconsin Aviation is the FBO in Watertown there, and my good friend Jeff Baum owns it. He's got just a dynamite maintenance department. Yeah, we take the airplane apart in the winter, checking for cracks, et cetera. And I broke the airplane a few times over the years. I've got many more stories where I broke things and whatever. We've had to beef up the airplane, but it's doing really good now because we've got everything reinforced where it needs to be. But yeah, we take it apart every year and really look hard at it, much harder than a normal airplane, because it does. It's it's getting worked hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you see much of a future for general aviation with various restrictions coming along and the idea that they're taking up space that airliners should be taking?
You know, I hope so. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with general aviation. You know, we talk about fuel prices being, pretty expensive for general aviation, but really that's not your biggest expense. Your insurance and hangar and maintenance is actually way more than what you're going to spend in fuel. So fuel, even at $6 a gallon, is still reasonable enough to fly general aviation. I'm hoping that the message gets out there, and my good friend Jeff was inducted into the Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Fame, and his theme was that we're not doing a good enough job selling our story, what GA can do for our country. You know, if you have a relative, so many times someone has a relative in a small town that they need to get to a big city or someplace where they got better medical care. With a small airport, you can put them in an airplane and get them there very quickly versus in a car. And that, it's stuff like that, business meetings for commerce. You know, a lot of times, if GA goes away, you'll have to fly to a major metropolitan city, rent a car, and then drive to wherever the small town is where someone wants to put in a factory or do a contract or whatever. With GA, you can fly point A to point B and save so much time. So I'm hoping that GA survives and that we get the story out there that there is still a lot of good things from general aviation that we shouldn't let go in this country. I've got a friend of mine from France who comes over here every year, and he rents from Jeff Baum. He rents an airplane and flies cross countries to go look at museums in the United States. His name's Patriotism. He was 3-time national aerobatic champion for France, and we're really good friends. He said, please don't let them ruin your country. You have so many freedoms over here with general aviation that we don't have. And he comes over here once a year and rents an airplane and goes. He was out in California last year. The year before, he was, he goes all over the place. He goes to South Dakota, goes everywhere. Because he said, you have so many airports and you're so free with allowing people to fly where they want. And it's something that I think we need to get our story out there so that GA does survive. And it does provide jobs. Jeff provides, I don't know how many employees he's got, but he's got 3 FBOs, the big one in Madison, Watertown, and Juneau. So he's got a lot of employees, mechanics, pilots, etc. So there's jobs and economy there too. So. Yes, sir.
How many hours are in your logbook, sir?
Well, 2 years ago, I'm getting kind of bad about documenting them as good as I used to. 2 years ago, I had 38,000. So now I haven't looked recently, but I'm probably another 16 to 1,800 on that. So
That's
I
a
got
lot.
a few. I'm going to do it till I get it right.
Well, you keep hitting, keep doing those snap rolls and big things. It just.
I can break
Yes,
in here.
in the back.
You were just saying moments ago about freedoms and aviation. For people like us, or not pilots, just regular air shows, what other country would be second to the United States as far as freedoms in flight? Would it be Canada, Australia? What would be second as far as freedom of flight? Where you live in?
It'd be Australia, not Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too liberal up there.
Yeah, they're struggling up there with GA. I hate to say that, because I got some good Canadian friends.
So
And,
all these countries, you're just saying Australia's probably second to us as far as aviation.
Yeah,
Yep, they have like a similar EAA, they give up, public aviation for other countries, they are on
you know, that, the EAA, Wisconsin's, should be really proud of what Paul Polveresny put together. I mean, it's the largest gathering of aviation in the world when they do Oshkosh. And to bring families there, they can see so many things. I mean, it's just unbelievable how many different things they can see at that event. And you can't see it all in one day. And the EAA is certainly trying to do a lot for general aviation, and they have. So, but that's a good organization. AOPA is a great organization. The IAC is another good one. NBAA, the business, and keep it viable so that politicians don't shut us down. Yes, sir.
So when you did you ever do any air racing, like the Reno air races?
I did not. I did not. You know, I almost did, but I was thinking about putting my biplane in it when they first started doing biplane racing. But I just didn't have enough time. Just didn't have enough time to do it.
Well, you have the MX now, you can do the Red Bull air race.
Yeah, well, they're coming back.
Yeah,
They're coming back. And that airplane's competitive for that. Yeah, I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie.
Don't want to flab it in, want to play down.
Yeah, my threshold of excitement, I guess, is a little higher than others. Yes?
On your Super Chipmunk, sir, I noticed you use what I take to be the rear seat slot.
Yes.
Is that due to the extra weight of the engine, of your
No.
replacement engine? No?
No, I've actually got some lead in the tail to offset the engine. No, the reason I do is the seats in the Chipmunk are fixed. They don't adjust. You can't slide them fore and aft. And for airplane stability, the center of gravity, you can change that by moving the weight around the center of lift. And the seats are close to that. But I can't move the seats, and originally the airplane was soloed from the front seat, and that made it a little bit nose heavy and more stable. I switched the airplane over so that I could fly from the back seat, and that moved my center of gravity back to the very aft edge of the airplane, of the envelope, so it's not very stable. And when you lose stability, you gain maneuverability. So that's why I did that.
And one more, when you were doing the Fang salute there, did you have a loose belt in, or were you prepared to just?
No, I'm unstrapped completely.
Just.
If you noticed on that one picture, and I don't know if I can get that back, I'm getting out of the cockpit.
I think you might have been able to open a parachute, but I'm not
right
sure
there.
you would have.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
If you look, see my knee?
Yeah.
I'm hanging onto a bar up on the canopy up there,
Mhm.
and my right knee is bumping the stick to fly the airplane a little bit. And then I'm using my body. My body is in the wind, and at 130 miles an hour, I move my body. It's like a control surface. It moves the airplane a little bit. Now, it's not very positive control, but I've practiced it a lot. And I found that if I fly it slower, the airplane starts to mush and starts to settle. If I fly it faster, I can't hang on.
So your grip is pretty tight there, yes?
It's an iron grip. It's an iron grip. Yeah.
Unless it's windy, I've seen the Manitowoc where it's really windy and he stood up and went, okay, I'm sitting back down again.
Yeah, if it's real windy and bumpy, it'll try to throw me out of the airplane, then I have to sit down. So.
You wear a chute though, right?
The chute, I'm only at 100 feet. The parachute's worthless.
Well, I mean, but you do
Give
wear
it a shot.
chute in.
Never give up.
Oh, I'd probably give it a shot, but it never.
Yeah, you'd be so low.
Yeah, I'm not at 100 feet. The chute is good down to 300 feet, but that means you got to be over the side of the airplane by probably 1,000 feet. My whole show is underneath 1,000 feet. But I wear a parachute for practice, and then I wear it because I fit the airplane the same way all the time. The ergonomics of how I use the flight controls and everything, that's a cushion for me. So I always do wear it.
Okay, let me break in here for a second.
Okay.
I suspect that we may be able to impose on Jim to hang around a few more minutes and answer other questions.
Yes.
But you would use the comment of doing it right. I had fully anticipated an interesting program, and I think Jim really did it right for us.
Oh,
this
thank you.
has been fascinating.
Thank you.
And just a little certificate
Oh,
of
thank you.
appreciation for
Well,
what
thank you
you've
so
done here.
much.
You're
Thank you so
history of
Thank you.
Mitchell Field, which you might enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Bad days when you can't fly.
Yeah, well, thank
Go
you.
through that. You're very welcome. Thank you.